Hi class, welcome to week 3. This week we'll discuss managing and controlling stakeholder engagement. This requires us to understand how to communicate and work with our stakeholders to meet their needs or expectations, how to address issues as they occur, and how to foster appropriate stakeholder engagement in project activities throughout the project lifecycle. We'll discuss stakeholder engagement in this week's discussion, and you'll have several reading assignments to support our discussion topics. The main takeaways from this week are how to, 1, identify and discuss stakeholder engagement activities, how to recognize the relationship between these stakeholder management activities and the project life cycle, and 3, how to recognize common stakeholder issues that influence our project success. Of course, to be successful, the project manager must build a cooperative network among a diverse set of allies. At least we hope they're allies. They began by identifying who the key stakeholders are on the project. They followed that up with a diagnosis of the nature of their relationships and the basis for how they might exercise influence over the project. Effective project managers are skilled at acquiring and exercising a wide range of influence. They use this influence in a highly interactive management style to monitor the project performance and initiate appropriate changes in project plans and direction. They do so in a manner that generates trust among these stakeholders, which is ultimately based on others' perceptions of their character and their competence. Not your perception, but how others perceive you as the project manager. The project managers are encouraged to keep in mind these following suggestions. First, you need to build that relationship before you need it. It's not good to come to someone and say, I need something from you now, and try to negotiate with that person or that section or department if you haven't built a good relationship with them first. Always identify your key players and what you can do to help them before you need their assistance. It's always easier to receive a favor after you've granted one. So always think about giving first and then trying to get something in return for that when you do need it. You may not need it right now, but you may need it further on in the project. Of course, this requires that the project manager sees the project in systems terms and then to appreciate how it affects other activities and the agendas inside and outside the organization. So, the project has numerous impacts on areas across the organization and outside the organization. So really understand, use that systems thinking to understand how it impacts and influences other people and other organizations. So from this perspective, you can identify opportunities to do good deeds and then to garner the support of others when you need it most. Of course, trust is sustained through your frequent face-to-face contact with your stakeholders. Your trust is going to wither if you neglect it. So don't neglect your stakeholders. Keep them engaged and understand their needs as much as your needs, and you'll keep building on that trust as you go along. And always be open and honest with your stakeholders. Of course, this is really particularly true under conditions when you have rapidly changing conditions and a lot of uncertainty that is naturally occurring in a project and will engender the doubt and suspicion among your stakeholders. So, keep it in the back of your mind that a project is highly uncertain and people are thinking, this is just not sounding right. So you keep communicating with them and make sure they understand what's going on in the project. So maintain that frequent communication and contact with your key stakeholders. Keep them abreast of the developments. Let them know what's happening. Be concerned about what they're concerned about. And think about, do a reality check. Is things going the way it should be going? And focus your attention on the project. So those frequent face-to-face interactions really do affirm that mutual respect and trust among each other. Okay? And so ultimately, you want to exercise influence in an effective and ethical manner. And I want to stress ethical here, that you need to be ethical in all your dealings with your project stakeholders. They know when you're not being ethical with them. And it all begins and ends with how you view the other parties. So do you view them as potential partners, or do you view them as potential obstacles to your goals? If there are obstacles, then you need to use your influence and manipulate and gain compliance and cooperation. You have to do that sometimes. If they're partners, you want to exercise your influence to gain their commitment and support. People who view your social network building as a building partnerships see every interaction with two goals: resolving the immediate problem and the concern, and improving the work relationships, so that next time it will be even more effective. So experienced project managers do realize that what goes around does come around sometime in their working on a project, and they try to really avoid antagonizing those key stakeholders just for a quick success. Think of long term, because your project's going to be there for a while. So think about building that relationship in the long term manner. So in Chapter 13 of your PMBOK, you'll find the inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs of the Identify Stakeholder process. There's several source documents that you want to consider when identifying your project stakeholders. Documents such as the business documents, business case, or the benefits management plan, and then the project charter are just a few of the source documents you should consider when identifying your project stakeholders. You should also consider any project procurement documents that are out there. That'll help you get an idea of who your external project stakeholders are. And at some point, you should have identified stakeholders in your project communications management plan. And I know this may seem like the old adage, the chicken or the egg, which came first scenario. Do you prepare a communications management plan first, or do you identify your current stakeholders first? This is an iterative cycle of building the communications foundation for the project and also identifying and assessing your project stakeholders pretty much simultaneously. So don't get hung up on what you got to do first. It's kind of done in the same at the same time, a little bit here, a little bit there. You go back and you adjust certain plans. So and then you adjust your stakeholder register. So it's just something you do continuously throughout the project. Techniques that are used in stakeholder identification can be as simple as having a brainstorming session among your project team and using your expert judgment to the more elaborate tools and techniques such as gathering data through surveys and questionnaires. And then, of course, there's always stakeholder mapping. So just think about your project and how involved you need to get in the stakeholder identification. Sometimes it could be real simple and clear who your stakeholders are, and sometimes they're kind of hidden in the project documentation. So just be aware of the complexity of your project and how you need to, what tools and techniques you need to use to identify your stakeholders and assess those stakeholder needs. So what I was going to say is this is where, having the benefit, you really benefit from having a project manager who's skilled in project communications and stakeholder analysis, because getting that right up front is really important. If you overlook a stakeholder that's critical to your project, it can take a while to recover from that little small error. At least you think it's a small error, but that stakeholder doesn't think it's such a small error. Of course, the results of your output to the Identify Stakeholder process is the stakeholder register and any change requests that are needed to the already completed project documents and updates to the project management plan. And as a result of this process, you should have a good idea then of who has interest in your project, who wants to be involved in your project, or actually who should be involved in the project, and then who might have the most influence or impact on your project. And of course, don't forget there's interdependencies among your stakeholders, not between you and your stakeholder, but between the two stakeholders or between the multiple stakeholder groups. There's going to be interdependencies and interactions that you may not be able to influence yourself. So just be aware of those and how those might impact your project and the movement forward on your project. And of course, you always need to remember that you want to identify and assess your project stakeholder engagement throughout the project. This is not just a one-time activity. It's something that happens from the beginning of the project till, through the execution of the project, and not so much at the end of it, but you're still assessing your project stakeholders at the end, because you still need to close out this project. So if your key stakeholders are not happy with the project, you need to know why. Anyway, so meet you in discussions this week, and don't forget you'll have to submit your final stakeholder management plan. That's you started in week 2, and now you want to complete that in week 3. I hope you're able to use that feedback that I gave you, or that I will be giving you, to complete that assignment.